And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this fine Monday. We have a lot to talk about on today's show, as we normally do. But before I get into that, I just want to remind you guys to donate or tip and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to streamelements.com/GSMCsportsnetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show. And once again, for bonus coverage materials that are not covered by this live broadcast, make sure to go to patreon.com and search up GSMC Sports Network. And that is where you can find all the exclusive content for the podcast that I do, the football podcast and the baseball podcast, and of course the college football, basketball, and fantasy football podcasts as well. So, like I said, got a lot to talk about today, of course. And, just to double check, I do have sound because I know last week when I did the double show, I did not realize that I didn't have sound. So I was basically talking on mute for pretty much the whole first half of the football podcast. And then by the time I realized that, it was like, I shouldn't say it was too late because then I went back and redid it, but it was just... It was a mess on Friday, but we were able to get through it and, made sure that everything was right before I went on, so that's good. And, so let's get right into what we're going to talk about. So in the first part of the show, as you can see on the bottom, we're going to talk about the 49ers and the Eagles both losing yesterday. Both teams were favored in their games, and they both ended up taking their first losses of the season, so now there is no more undefeated teams left in the NFL. So that'll be the first topic of today's show. Then in the next two parts of the show, we'll talk about the early window games, the second part of the show, and then in the third part of the show, we'll talk about the late window games, and especially we'll get into the Sunday night game because that game actually was competitive, believe it or not. And then we will get into, for the final part of the show, we'll preview tonight's game between the Cowboys and the Chargers. So that's the rundown for today's show. So let's get right into the first part of the show, which is talking about the 49ers and the Eagles both losing and dropping to 5-1 respectively. And now there's no more undefeated teams. So going into these games yesterday, the 49ers, when I went off the air on Friday, they were a 10-point favorite over the Browns. And that was because Deshaun Watson wasn't playing, and P.J. Walker was going to end up getting the start. And the 49ers, coming off of a 42-10 win over the Cowboys, it looked like they were going to roll over the Browns and get an easy win. But that was not the case. They actually got into a little bit of a skirmish in the before the game started. Elijah Moore was starting with some of the players on the Niners, so both teams were, getting into fights before the game, so that had to be broken up. Deebo Samuel was and Trent Williams were for the 49ers players that were highlighted in that in those fights in the beginning before the game started. So then the game starts. 49ers go right down the field, and they score a touchdown. 5 plays, 84 yards in under 3 minutes. Christian McCaffrey scores yet another touchdown. So, yeah, they go up 7-0. And then the Browns get the ball back. They get the ball on their first drive, and P.J. Walker throws a pick to Fred Warner. Then the Niners end up missing a field goal. The Browns, they end up missing a field goal on their next possession. 49ers punted. Browns punted. So that's how the first quarter went. Then Niners got a field goal to go up 10-0 in the second quarter. And the Browns, they went 5 plays, 83 yards. And they got a touchdown of their own, so they were down 10-7. P.J. Walker threw a 58-yard pass to Amari Cooper, and that was a great catch. And that led to a direct snap to Kareem Hunt, who scored a touchdown from 16 yards out. So that ended up being the Browns' first touchdown of the game. They made the extra point. And then the Niners punted again. Browns punted again. That's how the first half went. Browns, they opened up the second half. 9 plays, 48 yards. They ended up getting a field goal. So that tied the game. Brock Purdy ended up throwing an interception, but that didn't lead to anything. Both teams punted. Browns, they kicked the field goal. So they were up 13-10 going into the fourth quarter. Then both teams punted their first two possessions of the fourth quarter. And then Browns P.J. Walker threw a pick. Niners, they got a touchdown. That was late in the game, too. Niners ended up getting a touchdown with Jordan Mason, and we'll explain why in a little bit, why he was in the game. Then the Browns kicked a field goal. Niners punted. And then the Browns, they took another drive, 9 plays, 63 yards. A minute and 16 that drive took. And, they were up 19-17. Then Brock Purdy, 9 plays, 52 yards, got them in the field goal range. And the Niners missed the field goal there. And they ended up losing 19-17. So, yeah, it was a rough game for Brock Purdy. He went 12 of 27, 125 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He was sacked 3 times. Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel both were ruled out of this game. Christian McCaffrey is dealing with an oblique and a rib injury, so he's got a pair of injuries. And then I think Deebo Samuel, I want to say he's dealing with I think it's a shoulder injury, I want to say. He's going to be undergoing more tests on his shoulder. So the 49ers, they lost 2 key pieces in this game. I mean, Christian McCaffrey has been one of the best non-quarterback players in the NFL so far this year. Outside of his touchdown, which was a receiving touchdown, on the ground they didn't really do much, the Niners. Like I said, Jordan Mason, he had to run the ball. He did have a touchdown in the game. George Kittle only had 1 reception for 1 yard. He really didn't do anything in this game. Ayuk was actually their leading receiver. He had 4 receptions for 76 yards. On the Browns side, P.J. Walker really didn't do good. He had 2 picks in this game. He passed for under 200 yards. But, the Browns, they did run the ball well. Ran for 160 yards. Jerome Ford had 84 yards on the ground. Kareem Hunt had the touchdown. He had 47 yards rushing. Amari Cooper had a good game, 4 receptions for 108 yards. But I think the big story in this game really is the Browns' defense. The Browns' defense was great. They forced Brock Purdy to turn the ball over. They put a lot of pressure on him. And, they get a huge win, and that's with P.J. Walker starting at quarterback against a team that really everybody was looking at as being, above and beyond like the favorites right now. And that was actually Brock Purdy's first regular season loss. So give the Browns respect. The defense really showed up. Jim Schwartz has done an excellent job as a defensive coordinator for the Browns. So, they forced a turnover. And, also I think the other thing, too, is not having McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel, changed the complexion of the whole game, really. But, again, that's not to discredit the Browns' defense. They really played well. That defense is very good. And listen, now with McCaffrey and Deebo maybe missing some time, people still talk about Brock Purdy maybe being a system quarterback. Let's see what he's really made of now when he doesn't have Christian McCaffrey out there, which is a security blanket, and Deebo. You still got Ayuk and you still got George Kittle, but, that's half of your big playmakers. So we'll see what happens, but, that was not a good performance by the Niners offense. They take their first loss. So now let's get into the second game, which is talking about the Eagles now. So they ended up losing to the Jets 20-14. Jalen Hurts, 3 interceptions in this game, and the Eagles as a team had 4 turnovers. I think DeAndre Swift was the one who fumbled in the game. I think he was responsible for he was. So 4 turnovers in the game for the Eagles. Jets, they improved to 3-3 on the season. Listen, I thought especially with the Jets defense being out without their 2 top corners, no DJ Reed, no more Sauce Gardner, I thought the Eagles were going to pick apart this defense. But that was not the case. In the first quarter, they had the ball for almost 10 minutes, 19-play drive, 83 yards to go up 7-0. Jets get a field goal. Then the Eagles Jalen Hurts to DeAndre Swift in the second quarter to put them up 14-3. And that was the last time the Eagles scored. The Jets held them scoreless. I think it was through their final like 7 drives of the game, whatever it was. But yeah, Zerline kicked a couple of field goals. So it was 14-9 at the half. Then the Jets got a field goal in the third quarter. So it was 14-12. And late in the game, on third down, the Eagles drop back to throw it. And Hurts throws a pick. Hurts throws an interception. Threw it to Adams on the Jets, who brings it all the way back, 45 yards. And then on the next play, Breece Hall takes it up the middle, 8 yards for a touchdown. They also got the 2-point conversion. Zach Wilson threw it to Randall Cobb. And then the Eagles, they couldn't do anything. And the Jets kneeled it down, and that was it. Jets end up winning the game, and the Eagles dropped to 5-1. And yeah, Jalen Hurts 3 picks. I mean, he didn't have a good game either. So, and you know what? Again, got to give credit where credit is due to the Jets defense, because without their top 2 corners, I mean, they forced 4 turnovers in this game. I mean, the offense really wasn't getting anything going. But that interception set up the touchdown to put them ahead. And the Jets, they improved to 3-3 heading into the bye week. And listen, after the Broncos win last week, the Jet fans, I mean, some of them were like, hey, maybe, playoffs. I mean, it could be it. I mean, beating one of the worst teams in football. But now you go out and you beat one of the best teams in football. You give them their first loss of the season, and this is without your top 2 corners. Listen, the Jets' defense, and especially at home too, I mean, they forced Josh Allen to throw 3 interceptions. Mahomes threw 3 interceptions, and now Jalen Hurts threw 3 interceptions. And listen, they could have beat the Chiefs. I mean, this Jets defense is really good. And it really makes you wonder, what would have happened if Rodgers didn't get hurt? Now, we did see him. He was throwing passes on the field. No crutches, nothing, before the game. So, listen, I still think he's not coming back this year. I think he's definitely coming back next year. But if this guy somehow plays this year and the Jets make the playoffs, I mean, that would just be incredible. But I would be very, very scared for him, because I just am afraid he's going to get hurt if he ends up playing this year. But, I mean, listen, it is no crutches, no walking boot. I mean, who knows? Who knows? But Jets pick up a huge win. Eagles, they end up taking a tough loss there. That was rough. The offense just didn't play well. I mean, Hurts did not have a good game. Both teams, 49ers and Eagles, did not have good games. And that just goes to show you, any given Sunday, really. You got P.J. Walker starting for the Browns, and they still ended up winning that game. And then you got the Jets with their quarterback issues. Zach Wilson has looked a little bit better, but still, he's not the answer for them. The defenses really carried those teams to victory yesterday against both of these teams who have, some of the best offenses in the league. So that was big. Those were big wins for both teams, because both teams are, fighting for wild card spots, in the AFC. And the Browns, I mean, it's possible they can win the division. I still don't think the Jets don't really have a chance with that. But, listen, I think the Jets, with their good defense, they could be a playoff team. I mean, and they've showed that, especially at home, that they could play some of these good quarterbacks. I mean, these are some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts. I mean, these are the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL. So... big win for both of those teams. And, so, with the Eagles, I mean, next week they play the Dolphins, so it doesn't get any easier, but it's at home. And then for the Niners, I mean, listen, who knows how long McCaffrey and Debo, if they're going to miss some time. I mean, I think McCaffrey might, because he's got 2 injuries he's dealing with. But we'll see what happens with Debo. Like I said, he's going to be undergoing more tests. So, with that, we are going to take our first break of the show, and then when we come back, I will recap all of the rest of the early window games from yesterday. So stick around, and we will be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.